Good evening and welcome to Legal Tech Live, episode 66, with the team of the MIT Computational Law Report. It's Dazza Greenwood on the left of my screen and Bryan Wilson on the right of my screen. Let's change our view there a little bit. And of course, our guest co-host, returning guest co-host by guest demand.
Hey guys, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very excited to have these guys here. Dazza, a little bit about you, and I'm not going to read it because it's too long. I'm not going to read a lot of it because it's too long. You've done too many great things. But I'm taking this from your LinkedIn profile. Daniel Dazza Greenwood heads civics.com, a consultancy on digital identity and technology policy. Dazza is a lecturer and researcher at the MIT Media Lab, focusing on public policy, information technology, and innovation, focusing on big data, identity federation, personal data sharing, and trust frameworks. And with him, with the amazing mustache, who's outshining all of us tonight with that mustache, is Bryan Wilson. Bryan is a legal engineer interested in reimagining the ways technology, design, and visualization can be combined to improve the legal system. He is currently editor-in-chief of the MIT Computational Law Report. Legal Tech News listed him as one of the 18 millennials changing the face of legal tech for work, and completed as a fellow in inaugural class of fellows with the ABA Center of Innovation. Thank you all for being here. And of course, Hannah from Legal.io. And Hannah, do you have an announcement of some other exciting things that you've been doing? Do you want to share anything like that yet, or should we keep that quiet for now?
Yeah, no, it's public now. So
it is, okay.
So I have basically taken a role in a venture capital fund. So I'm still an operator at Legal.io by day and a venture capitalist by night. So if anyone has any hot leads on the future of work and seed and pre-seed companies, feel free to send them my way.
Excellent. Outstanding. And they're lucky to have you in the venture fund. And we were lucky to have her represent us at Legal Tech Disrupt.
Oh, no.
SF. Yeah. So thank you for that. Dazza, Bryan, thanks for being here. Tell us about the MIT Computational Law Report. We normally talk to startups in legal technology. You're somewhere on the academic/startup spectrum with a variety of different media mixed in there. Tell us what the MIT Computational Law Report is about.
Thank you. Bryan and I are teaming up to really launch this thing, and it's a new kind of publication to get the word out and to do some community building in this new area called computational law, which we'll get into in a moment. But it grew out of law.mit.edu, which is the sort of umbrella for a bunch of research activities here on campus, and it's really been situated primarily in the Human Dynamics Lab, which Sandy Pentland runs. So it's really about data and almost computational social science, or sometimes we call it social physics, being able to understand people and behavior and systems better by using data and analytics. And what the real vision is to be able to reimagine and re-engineer law and legal processes as computational systems. In other words, data-driven, maybe model-based, software-enabled, networked systems, like so many other industries have already transitioned, banking and finance, aeronautics, like many industries have. Now it's time for the law to go from a bunch of apps and individual services to more of a digital footing. This is what we call computational law. And MIT has traditionally served a role as industries adopt new technologies and transform themselves to help with convening, idea flow, catalyzing innovations. And that's what we're aiming to do with this new publication in so many ways, which I hope we talk about.
Excellent. Well, let's talk about them. Hannah, what have you got for them?
Yeah, so I guess one of my biggest questions, and I always like to ask entrepreneurs, is what was the inspiration for the project? How was the idea originally born?
Well, so the I would say like the Genesis. I was going to go with Genesis.
Genesis block.
The Genesis moment was 2 years ago, though.
Yeah. Well, we have different Genesis moments, maybe. But no, so last January in the MIT IAP Computational Law Workshop course, we've been playing around with this idea of like, oh, what might, a new publication for law look like if it were to reflect not only the changing topics that can be covered in the law, but also the changing formats, the different ways that people are beginning to practice law, to understand law, and to interface with the law. And kind of to that end, we've modeled.
I should probably say, also the new ways people are interfacing with media. Like, law reviews are very stodgy. But if you think about, blogs like 538 or, like the New York Times kind of data-driven journalism where you could see the underlying data and maybe explore it, move some parameters around on a visualization and and where that's part of the experience. Podcasts like yours, video, and making some of these projects reproducible. So the ways people interact with the law are changing. The ways people interact with media are changing.
And so we wanted to really reflect that in the form that the journal's taking. So we take a lot of written pieces. That's, I would say, primarily what we have right now, but we've also created space intentionally for rich media. So, the visualizations, the interactive kind of media pieces there, but we've also got space for reproducible software applications so that if you have, some data set and you want to figure out what the strengths and weaknesses of some sentencing algorithm are, for example, this would be a way to actually release some of that information into the world and let people play around with it so that there's greater transparency and more of a dialogue about what is actually happening instead of catching ourselves talking in anecdotes and things like that. So it was this idea that I think really the idea behind this is that law can be done better. And, we don't have to change the narrative. We can narrate the change and figure out how, what
write that down.
We should publish that.
We should.
And that is a big part of the catalyst was that, things are different now. And, MIT is an engineering school. It's a school of science. And what a lot of data science is happening, a lot of applications, people's practices and legal processes are depending on. And so it should be reproducible. It should be capable of scrutiny. And it also should be presented some of these key design patterns and technical innovations, at least the types of them, ought to be available in a way where people can not just reproduce them, but also try to extend them or try to build upon them, the way the scientific process works. So we think that this will allow not just more trustworthiness and reliability, but also we hope that it'll catalyze the broader transformation of law. I agree. I would call that the proximate cause of what actually caused this to happen, like this in the next few months. Mm-hmm. The original, but for like the great grandfather and mother or whatever, like their first date, what actually happened at the Legal Hackers, our favorite group, first Computational Law and Blockchain Festival, where some of the co-organizers, Jameson Dempsey, Tony Lai, and others, we were talking about documenting what was happening around the world in these hackathons. And we thought that, the then organizers thought we should do like a new kind of like journal, or in my case, I was thinking more like a blog or a new magazine that would capture that. And ultimately what came out of that was the Stanford
Journal of Blockchain Law and Policy.
Right, Journal of Blockchain Law and Policy, and they actually executed, thanks to Steve Nam and others. I got on PubPub the domain name Computational Law for our part of it. But you know, it's one thing to have an idea; it's another thing to execute. And it was really this great team getting together that decided that we really could do this and brainstormed how we could do it. And then Bryan stepping up and actually suspending his previously scheduled life in Kansas City to come to MIT and help actually realize the potential. So that's how it came. That was the idea, and that's how it's coming to be.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I want to thank our just one second there, Hannah. I want to thank Anne Marie and Mitch Jackson for joining us tonight. If you guys have any questions for Dazza and Bryan, please ask them. Go ahead, Hannah.
Yeah, so one of the things, and I think you brought this up, Bryan, but one of the things that I've thought a lot about is not just how can we sort of build new applications, but how do we create a safe space, a space for people to go and discuss the future implications of technology. So you talked about sort of like sentencing, right? And sentencing algorithms. And I don't think anybody truly understands what that looks like. And I think the fact that you guys are building a platform to sort of proactively engage the community and having that conversation, I think it's going to be crucial to ensure that the technology is adopted in a responsible manner. You know, and I've been thinking a lot about what the court system role is in this. What is the role of bar associations? So to that end, how have you guys sort of interfaced with different actors within the ecosystem, whether it be law firms, whether it be bar associations, whether it be, you know, governmental entities, to sort of gauge their interest in the project?
Well, there's 3 C's. There's conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Collaborations, and convening.
No, it's conversations, convening, and content.
Oh, content. Yeah. Well, number one thing is if people are reading similar things, you know, hopefully they'll begin to get onto the same, you know, have a similar, you know, knowledge base and similar page. But I think the way that what I would highlight in terms of how do you really get people together, I think there's no substitute for being together in person or as close to in person as possible. Like I think the Zoom call you can do a great deal interpersonally, but with the sense of presence that you have, and that, you know, humans are social creatures. You know, we like to talk and we like to exchange ideas in that way, and we like to come to new insights together. You know, and so I'd say the convening power of MIT, and also creating containers where people can collaborate and experiment with things together in I wouldn't say necessarily a low stakes way, but in a scientific way, in the sense that we have a hypothesis, we want to test it. Mm-hmm. We will prove it or we will disprove it. We're not all going to be fired if we disprove. It's not a career-ending failure. It's rather a scientific experiment. And I've had experience at MIT and other industries where when we can convene groups to do an experiment under these kinds of auspices, it's safer to do things that are more experimental and then to learn from the results. But I think these are some of the ways in which we hope to accomplish what you said, Hannah.
Well, and I think a specific example was with the beta launch. We had the fortune of being the last day of the MIT Connection Science Members Week. And because this publication is rooted in MIT Connection Science, we got to actually do some of these conversations with people who are in the government. There were people from Australia and Italy who were interested. We got to work with people who are interested from the business side. So Ernst & Young was there, for example.
Liberty Mutual.
Liberty Mutual was there. We got to work with, you know, there was great representation from big law firms, from, you know, smaller law firms. There was great representation from like tech companies and data warehousing groups. And so getting all of those people together under one roof and presenting this idea to them and saying, you know, there needs to be this great role of collaboration between all of these industries that have kind of been, for better or worse, siloed. And I think the law is particularly to blame in that regard with, you know, some of the professionalism rules that have been associated with the guild. But to gather all those people together and to get everybody to realize it and come away saying the same thing, where everybody's like, yes, we need to collaborate. So we develop these efficiency gains so that the, transaction frameworks that we have are more, that they're better integrated and able to conduct the types of transactions that we're capable of executing with these new technologies. And just coming up with the design patterns to do that, I think, is something that we're really looking forward to, at least surfacing a conversation about.
Excellent. And I do have a question. I do want to ask, we've got Aaron Levine is here. Prashant Shenoy has joined. So if you guys have any questions for Dazza and Bryan, please ask them.
We also accept comments and ideas.
Comments and ideas also. And you guys are we're still using law.mit.edu for right now, right? Because that's what I just posted.
Yes, that's the right entry point at the moment. And we have, I don't know if we mentioned this, but do you want like a scoop for your podcast?
Well, I was getting to the scoop, but you're going to scoop my scoop here, Dazza.
Oh, no, you get the first scoop, man.
All right, go tell me what the scoop is.
Okay.
But let's say this. Let's say you're hearing it first here on Legal Tech Live, everybody.
Right. That's right. So December 6th is our target date for the public launch of the MIT Computational Law Report.
Excellent.
That's when you can read all about it
and play around with it.
And contribute to it and help understand, extend, expand, live it. And so we've got so you can find out where that's going to be at law.mit.edu. There may be a different domain name that we end up pointing to. So.
Excellent. Actually, so that's funny because I was going to go on the scoop that you did scoop me on that one. I was going to ask you to tell us about how your beta release, you've just done a beta release just a week ago. Tell us about that.
Okay. So,
it was awesome.
Yeah, it was fun. Anytime you can get the folks at MIT together to do an event, that's usually pretty interesting. And, that was kind of one of the reasons that it made it kind of like a no-brainer to get out here and work on this stuff, was because I'd been to enough of those sorts of events. And no, it was really great. We got to introduce the concept of computational law as this kind of new domain or meta domain within the larger context of the world in which we live. And we introduced it. We had overview sessions. And then we did a series of almost like roundtable discussions with all of the participants to the first release who wanted to be involved. And it worked out really great. I think we had 7 or 8 of the 11 or 12 publications. We had 7
authors.
Or 8 people, contributors, because some of them aren't writing. But we had a bunch of people submit or give their talks about their different topics. And it was really cool to see all these industry leaders from these different places giving feedback on the issues so that they could have a more well-rounded and inclusive view of the subject about which they were publishing on it. So it was a ton of fun, and we gave people a sneak peek into what Release 2 has in store, which may be another scoop.
Yeah. How many scoops can your ice cream cone hold?
Oh, we'll take all scoops that you're willing to give us tonight.
Well, so before we go further, let me fill out the answer a little bit about all the dimensions and facets of how awesome it was. So we started with Professor Sandy Pentland, who's he's the kind of North Star for the social physics research here that the computational law initiatives are happening under. And he opened up with a really terrific keynote. And we had some interesting discussion. His ideas really spurred. We didn't schedule Q&A, but it definitely happened.
Right.
And then we did a bit of an overview of the report. And we had Bryan from Thomson Reuters Labs, who's been a great contributor, and they're also one of the initial supporting organizations, said a few words. And we had
Cat Moon.
Yeah, Kat Moon was here. She's also on our board of advisors. She helped to fill out some of the human perspective. And computational law is great in theory, but lawyers aren't going to be interacting with hexadecimal, strings of data. Like, what is the UI? What's the UX? What's the human felt experience? And how are we going to conceive of and interact with this stuff? And she helped fill that out. Bob Craig, our CIO at Baker Hostetler, and another good friend and real supporter of this program, and also on the board of advisors, gave a kind of almost sort of like a senior statesman view of where this fits in the big picture of law, and how the practice of law itself is just at the nexus of transformation now, and why he felt that this was such an important initiative for the partners and associates at his firm and in the industry. Then we had a bunch of we had a bunch of members of our advisory board and editorial board there. They all said a few words. We did some mix and mingle, which is always great. That's when people get together. A lot of startups and all sorts of things have happened at the mix and mingle part. So we try to make sure there's a lot of that. And then we did these flash talks that Bryan mentioned, where we got a quick overview of a lot of the content for the main articles. And then we did a bit of a look ahead. And so all this was recorded in high def, and is archived right now, but not yet public, at the law.mit.edu YouTube channel, available at law.mit.edu. And we're going to unveil that before December 6th.
Okay.
Maybe sooner.
Maybe hopefully sooner.
We're
trying to get. We have some under the hood stuff that we're trying to iron out with the release of content, so that we're sure that it's being packaged in the most optimal way, because that's now our lives.
Yeah, I was as Dazza was explaining that, I'm thinking to myself, they had all these people speak about all this high level stuff in legal technology, and did they just write it down? And so I was a little nervous there for a second. But
no, we had a stenographer.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Yeah. Typical.
It's funny, one thing you might appreciate this, but an app that I use when we're doing podcasts, and that I'm in the process of doing with the video, is called Otter. Have you heard of Otter?
I have heard of Otter.
Yes, it's very good, right?
You ought to listen to it.
There we go. There we go.
It does a really, I think, serviceable kind of first cut of the transcription for audio, including it'll take the audio right out of the video track. And so when we do release it, the aim is to have the transcript, but also to chunk it down. We want the media to be very nibbleable, very snackable.
Right.
And so we want to have each of the 5-minute flash talks be individual little items, and all the little components and segments of the show to be available on their own. And of course, you're always welcome to binge our show if you want.
Naturally. Hannah, what have you got?
Yeah. So MIT is a very forward-looking, forward-thinking institution, right? That's what it's known for. Yes, thank you, gentlemen. But for everybody else, right? And this is part of the role, is to sort of bridge the gap with the 1 million+ attorneys and legal adjacent professionals and people that interact with the system. So for people that aren't sort of, sitting up in Boston, Cambridge, right? That aren't thinking about these things every day, it's kind of a two-part question. One, what do you guys really define as computational law? Can you sort of define it for the layman, for the person who's watching the podcast and they're like, I've heard about this, I'm still not entirely sure how this impacts me? And two, how do you guys think initiatives like this, like what is the profession going to look like 10 years from now? How is it fundamentally different? What does that vision look like?
Ooh, I kind of want to take the vision.
Hot potato.
I'll take the first.
We'll let you guys fight over it.
So, there's a really interesting, there's an interesting notion behind doing a project like this at MIT, right? Because there's no law school there. So it can kind of serve as almost like a neutral arbiter of the truth, and just bring in all of these participants and tell them and help show them novel ways to start interfacing with technology a little bit better. And so, we kind of are approaching this from a very embryonic stage of, this doesn't quite exist in ways that have really propagated across the industry. There are small bits and pieces of it that are taking place and that are happening.
Can I do my favorite example?
Like high frequency trading algorithms.
High frequency trading, my friends.
Mm-hmm.
High frequency. If they're contracts, that's legal.
Mm-hmm.
But there ain't no PDFs. Nuh-uh. No Microsoft Word. No. It's just data at the speed of thought, actually faster than the speed of thought.
So I think there it's like, okay, we're seeing technology enabling us to do cool and exciting things. Like we can definitely go really deep on, some of the mechanism design and token bonding of, what takes place with DAOs and all of the crazy math behind how you figure some of this stuff out.
Distributed autonomous organizations, this new way to form a kind of a firm or an entity using blockchain, just in a distributed way.
Yeah, thank you for spelling that. I actually saw Hannah tweeting about that one day, and I was like, what is DAO? Come on, spell it out for me, because I'm not in.
You've exposed me once we brought my Twitter account into it. I'm exposed, y'all.
Yeah, and I was like, you got to spell it out for me, and she educated me on
Not the Dow Jones, not the Dow Te Ching, but like even more mysterious in some ways.
Not Dowless, Texas.
Oh,
I gotta stop everybody and say, I love the partnership interaction that you guys have. It just makes me want to support whatever you guys are up to.
Yeah, come out.
No, it is fun. It's hard work and it's challenging, but I have to say it's been a lot of fun. And
yeah, you guys seem to have a good time together, which is important.
Yeah, no, and that's one of the things. That's kind of one of the reasons I think this can be sustainable is, so one, we think we would alienate a lot of people if we went really, really technical. So we want to do like a wide net, and bring people in and educate people and give them, an entree into this crazy newfangled thing that's happening. But a lot of the content, especially, so Sandy Pentland, our head honcho here, he's contributing like a really easy to read piece to our first release that is readable by anybody in any field and explains the value proposition of doing computational law in like a very clear and concise way. And so we want to, have this be for people who are interested in technology and how it can impact the law, but we also want to have a deeper side to it as well, where it's, people really drilling down on some of the most important issues in this space. And so we're kind of offering, we very intentionally wanted to focus on having it so that it could be whatever you needed it to be.
Yeah, or at least a few things.
Yeah.
And so
it's going to be fair. It's going to be fluid, essentially, and with some direction from you.
Yeah, there's a couple, and luckily it's not completely theoretical. Like we actually have the content. We need to finish rolling a few podcasts and finish some of
video
versions
editing
of some of the written content. But I think we can say quite certainly that one of the facets of, in the ways to use your word, that's fluid, is having a rolling release schedule. So we do have this sense of like the first issue is coming out.
Release.
Well, let me just use these words for a moment. Like the first issue, as you might think of it, if it was a law review, which it ain't, is coming out on December 6th. We're calling it a release, and we're doing point releases. So on the beta launch, we did 0.5 of the initial release. We got some feedback on that. We have release 1.0 in December 6th. Release 2.0 will be the second issue. and that'll be in the springtime. We'll do point releases in the meantime. So as blog posts and podcasts and smaller things kind of come along, we'll have like a rolling release schedule. So that's a kind of fluidity that's not typical, I think, in academic journals. The other way in which it's fluid is the way I think that you're kind of picking up on, which is, we've got the written content, but even that will have some like data, like iframes or widgets in there, so you could see not just a static, like
right.
Like a GIF or a JPEG of a graph, but you'll be able to interact with the data, click down to the data. But also, I think, frankly, podcasts, like one of the reasons I like your show so much is there is a fluidity to narrative and to conversation and to presence and the experience of people talking is part of a flow. And there's also kind of fluidity in the nature of having this part of under one of the menus where you can go and actually look at the data, or you could download an app and you can you try a Python notebook or try to create an LLC using DocAssemble. Or some of the little projects that we have going there. So that's something where you can kind of like do it yourself. So you can participate directly in co-creating the innovations that we're sharing. And that's that kind of felt that experience that people can have themselves, I think, is also part of this fluidity that you're talking about. So I think fluid's pretty good. It's also in a sense narrow. So to kind of maybe start to address your first question, which is, and what is the it again? We're using it a lot. So what can you define computational law? Well, that's a good question. And so, at a super rudimentary level, the thing to keep your eye on, particularly in this context, is the second word, law. So no big change in a sense, like law. What you learned in law school, or what you in your company, what you deal with the contracts, regulatory compliance, your cases, like the laws are the law. But now the form of law is changing. Increasingly there's jurisdictions that are starting to actually regulate in ways that are like code. So if you look at the SEC, I'd worked with them a fair amount. On their XBRL, it's Extensible Business Reporting Language regulation, so that if you're a publicly traded company and you're doing your filings, your disclosures, instead of doing that in PDF, which a PDF is digital, but it's not really computational, to compute in order to do, sort, filter, search, or to do like reasoning, or to do some kind of like statistical modeling, you want to be able to access the underlying information. So you need like more structured data for that. Like, give me all of this kind of a deduction, or that kind of cost, or these types of material contracts and so forth in the case of filing. So all that stuff's marked up with this dialect called XML, and the specific version is Extensible Business Reporting Language. That is a really good example of SEC, like, it could barely get more boring law than that, right, in a certain way. But it's kind of exciting, I think. I was talking to one of the commissioners in Chicago last week, Hester Pierce, was at Dan Katz's awesome block legal tech conference. And one of the things that I was talking to her about afterwards was their XBRL program and how it's rolling out. And she was very interested to hear how people were using it and how important it is. That's a novel thing to incorporate by reference an XML schema and the taxonomies that companies can add to themselves as they come up with novel ways of accounting for things. Another good example, I already mentioned, my favorite example is actually high frequency trading. This is law, it's contract. You've got all the elements of a contract. You can enforce it in court, lay a foundation, show who the parties are, what the terms were. Just boring old contract law
with nothing ever signed.
Well, is it so? An electronic signature,
electronic signature.
Electronic Transactions Act and e-sign is any sound, symbol, or method executed or adopted by a party with a present intent to be bound by or authenticate the record. So the record is this data that's coming together between systems that's algorithmic, but it's still terms, and you could articulate the terms and what the obligations are of each party just by looking at the data, and then part of the protocols indicate when it's a enforceable agreement, you know? And so it's the same old law, but we're now recomposing the law or refactoring the law as computational systems. And the part of what we want to help people understand and do, because it's fun and it's important, is how to engineer the law. So it's not something that just kind of like happened almost like, you know, rock formations over time, but it's something that we can deliberately design and we can engineer so that it's reliable, so that it's simple, so that it's streamlined, so that it's beautiful and trustworthy and usable. We can engineer the law. So come and engineer it with us at MIT.
Excellent. Wow.
That's
So
a
I have,
pitch, guys. I love it.
That was a very good pitch.
I also think it's the most concise explanation with like very tangible use cases that I have ever heard someone present.
Yeah, I agree, because I've been kind of watching that terminology. The computational thing is, you know, I've watched it, but that was very concise and very, very well described. We've got Yadu Bhargavan visiting from India. We got Sujesh Krishnan,
Hey,
wherever
guys.
he's at right now. Yadu says that's a great pitch. He really likes that. I agree. I have kind of a third aspect of Hannah's last question is you guys have brought, I mean, you got the high level computational stuff, you've got the law. How do you involve the major stakeholder here of people, consumers of the law?
Well,
Or do you just no worries about them?
Well.
Oh, yes, we do. Yes, we can. And here's how. So when you come, one of the really most wonderful ways that the big players can be involved is they can become supporting organizations, in fact. And in that way, Bryan can kind of get out of the Airbnb, and I can you can liberate me from consulting, and we can actually put more of our time into this.
Sure.
And we can, start to flow some of those resources into projects, into more like reporters and editors, and really make it even more good. So we want to get supporting organizations. We love you. We just don't yet know you. So come to law.mit.edu and get on board. Also, what if you want to join the conversation? You've been thinking about this. You've got an idea, some cool thing you're doing at your law firm. You're at a business and you had an idea for how to do something, faster, cheaper, better with technology, especially in this computational way we're talking about. Don't keep it to yourself. I mean, tell everybody about it and we can help you. Just go to our submissions page. It's Creative Commons. It can get out there easy. There's no paywall. We want to share the ideas, make sure they're all free and easy for people to learn about and to access and to share. So contribute your ideas and your content. And then finally, you can come to the events. Come hang out with us. Come to these very interesting, facilitated, roundtables and workshops. And don't we have a course coming up?
We've got a course coming up, Dazza.
Is this like am I counting scoops here? I should be, huh?
This is
like a Kentucky bucket for all this. I mix my food metaphors.
That is a good mixed metaphor.
Okay.
We have I thought of another scoop as well.
Oh, what is it?
I thought of another couple scoops.
I need to know.
Wow.
But we've got the Computational Law course coming up, and that's going to be January 7th, 8th, and 9th. And when we launch the full release of Release 1, we will have a sign-up page so that people can attend virtually.
But how much does it cost, Bryan?
It costs a low price of $0.00.
Wow. That's a great infomercial right there.
That's amazing.
Zero.
Yeah, rounding down to zero.
And then another thing that we've got that has been going for a while now that came out of Computational Law course a couple years ago, thanks to our friend Mr. Poppers.
Yeah, David Poppers.
Is the Computational Law Telegram channel.
That's right. Let's check it.
Which there's a publicly available link so that people can join that and stay in touch with the conversation that way. I'm not sure exactly where that link is, but we can send it to you so that it's posted in the description of the YouTube video.
We'll check it up. When this is done, I'll check it up at law.mit.edu.
Okay. Excellent.
And we also have a space that we're still finalizing a little bit, but we want to give all of the fans something. So we're creating a it's kind of like a membership tier, but it's just called fans. We want people to be involved with what we're doing, so we are giving fans, people who've stayed in touch with what we're doing, who are interested in what we're doing, we're giving them the ability to vote on certain things, like what does our logo look like, what should be what are the themes that you're interested in, what content should we cover more of. So we're trying to really leverage the interest that people have to create a sort of feedback loop so that we're doing things that are better for everybody, and doing things in a way that is much more collaborative and fun. It's fun getting to know people and talk to people and bring a face to something that people are really, really scared about.
Yeah, sure. Speaking of faces, so here is the Telegram channel. Lots of really interesting stuff. We're going into GDPR definitions of certain data types. And this is the face of our, I don't know if you can see it. This is the face of our Telegram channel.
Perfect.
That's Mia, the puppy of one of our advisory board members, Mila. And then David Poppers, who set up our Telegram channel, said, Dazza, can you put a gavel in Mia's mouth? And I said, yes, I can.
Of course, Mr. Poppers did that. Who else would have?
He's a creative guy.
One of our audience tonight, Sujesh Krishnan from Konami Software, asks, is the wait list going to reopen for the course? Is there a wait list on the course? Is it going to reopen?
Okay, so let me disentangle that. There's a few layers to that question. So the wait list that you're referring to doubtlessly is the wait list for the for the last year's course, which is like January 2019, and that ain't never reopening. Like that's done and dead and like wrapped, bagged, tagged, and shipped. So, but what's about to open is the registration list for the 2020 course. So we're looking ahead to 2020 in January. And so I encourage you to keep looking at law.mit.edu, or you can sign up on the contact form and we'll email you. The moment that is, if you sign up, we'll email you the moment that the registration is open, which should be no later than December 6th.
Correct.
Okay, excellent.
But what can he participate from India?
Yes.
Yes, you can.
I'm actually not sure where Sujesh is located right now. He's regularly traveling like Bryan.
Yeah, from Cambridge, like maybe you want to do it from your pajamas. You don't want to walk across the street to MIT from Cambridge. You can do it because you see it's available online and asynchronously too. So because the world is got a lot of time zones.
No, that was one of the, I think the coolest parts about last year was the first time we really embraced going fully digital for 2 days of the course.
Yeah, online first. So the people that were in the room got no special advantage. In fact, there were many people that came in the room and we actually ushered them out of the room so that we could deal with everybody equally. And we had little widgets where you can ask your questions, upvote the questions of others. So the people that were teaching were in the room. And we also did a flipped classroom last year, which I think we'll do again this year, where we'll get those lectures and talks out days or weeks ahead of the course. So you'll have time to absorb them. And then when we get the opportunity to talk with the presenters, you can really kind of you can ask questions and hear the dialogue with the benefit of having digested their content.
Very cool.
That's
Anna, go for it.
No, I mean, mine was more of just a comment, not even a question, but I think something that like continuously inspires me about the blockchain crypto movement is how global it was from the very start, right? Like I'm always inspired by the fact that like DevCon is located in like Osaka and not San Francisco, right? So I just think it's so great that you guys are sort of catering to a global audience from the start and you're keeping that in mind. Because most people don't have the luxury of being located in Boston or New York or San Francisco. So that's incredible.
And the world is, if I could add one quick thing, and then I'll shut right up. But the thing, one of the best pieces of advice I got when we were trying to scope this out, in the springtime, we had a lot of conversations, was from someone that was helping to produce podcasts at a local public radio station. And she said, she asked me, where are the people that really care about computational law? And I named I don't know, 8 or 10 people, I think 1 or 2 of whom were in the United States. And she's like, well, you should seriously just think about what you just said and make sure that you are aware that you may have a more popular audience for like the popular science kind of stuff that Sandy Pentland and other people are writing. And there may be an American audience, but the deep audience of like the deep innovators and the people that are really deeply into this already are more evenly distributed globally. And we've taken that to heart.
Yeah, and I think to that end, one of the interesting aspects about computational law is that, the nominal cost of scaling it is so low that perhaps some of the biggest impacts that this kind of paradigm shift can have is in places that don't already have great infrastructure there. So to the extent that we can design infrastructure from scratch, I think that's a little bit easier than when you have to work in these entrenched systems. And so, if we can start working with people who are in all these different places, I think that's even going to be a bigger advantage.
Yeah, that's actually like a super incredible point. I've also never heard someone make that point about the fact that similar to how countries completely skipped over the desktop generation and moved directly to mobile for the internet, you are basically making the point that there are entire, jurisdictions that are more or less going to skip over this entire, mess of PDFs and whatever that we're trying to dig ourselves out of. And they can go directly to computational law.
Yeah, and a lot of the
that is a brilliant point, guys. Somebody write a post about that. Bryan, I nominate you.
we learned a lot through the bigger group that we're part of, the Human Dynamics group that does this field of computational social science that we call social physics, about how there's a lot that you can do in developed countries for sure, but when it comes to the way that Sandy Pentland talks about it sometimes in our partners is population-wide change. Sometimes actually going to the developing world and going to smaller nations is a way that we can see further and test further, much faster, because just as Bryan was saying, they can skip a certain part. So like we did a huge thing for a few years with the small nation of Andorra, where we were able to instrument a lot of technology and see things that were happening across that entire jurisdictional system in ways that we'd still be in initial conversations if we were doing it in like Massachusetts or Chicago, even just like a big city.
Right.
Yeah. And you look at a lot of the places where the blockchain regulatory infrastructure is more robust, and it's places like Malta and Estonia. Right. And all of these small little places. And so I think there's something to be said about having that governmental regulatory agility of being small. And so I think that's, one of the really, really exciting places that we want to figure out how to connect with.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I love the terminology there, regulatory agility. I mean, that's something that we certainly don't have in California, and probably in many areas of the U.S. So, gentlemen, I don't want to keep you all night but Dazza, did you want to play a few chords for us? Since your guitar is right there.
Right, it's gently weeping. Yeah, we have the Media Lab jam session tonight, which I had to cut out of, and I was just texting the guy who like took my gear and put it under some desk I do not know where. But anyhow,
open source mic night.
Yeah, open source mic night is what we call it. So I'm going to spare you the guitar that I don't have an amp for. But how would you like to hear some IK oscillator? I think you'd love it. Okay,
go for it. And is this an Otter that you're using, or what app is this?
This is called IK Oscillator.
Oh, that's IK Oscillator. Okay.
I vote this is the theme song for you guys for the new project, right? You said we were going to vote on things like logos. I vote that.
Yeah.
Well, it's colorful, I'll say that.
We have very deep production values of, the DIY culture. It's really struck a chord with us.
Struck a chord. You did it again.
The mustache.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
That's fantastic. Gentlemen, how do people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about this? We've said it. We've repeated it for them throughout the evening. Repeat it for them again.
You, and by that we mean you, all of you, and you individually, yes, you, sir, you, ma'am, can get in touch with us, and we encourage you to, at law.mit.edu. Click near the top where it says contact, and that is, of course, how you contact us. Put your name in there, what you're interested in talking about. You can click a couple boxes if you want to stay up to speed on the research things at MIT, if you want to be informed of when the release occurs for the MIT Computational Law Report. Soon we'll have some more information there about the course and other fun activities and informative activities. And then you can just kind of freestyle, just free-form your questions, your ideas. We love ideas.
We love fluidity too.
Yep, you can let all that flow through that form. And you know what you get from a form? Structured data in a database where we can sort it, filter, search, and we can ultimately, put it on our Trello and other to-do things and get back to everybody. So you're probably wondering why no email? Email bad? Email, it becomes an avalanche, and I hate not getting back to people. We both do. So please use the form and help us help you to connect.
And also the Telegram channel.
Oh yeah,
we're on Telegram quite a bit.
Yep.
Okay.
It's like the less bad version of email.
Debatable.
Yeah.
And when you guys have announcements, just if we're on that sign-up form, will we get notified about announcements through that form, through signing up that way?
Indeed.
Yes, indeed.
Excellent. So that's it. Hannah, please tell folks how they can get in touch with you if they're interested.
So always Twitter or Hannah at legal.io. And the name's a palindrome, so don't forget it.
Very good.
Memory trick.
It could be a single in or a double in palindrome, though.
Oh my gosh. The mustache is right again, guys. It's
It is. So
you can blame my mom, who was an AP language and Shakespeare teacher, for all this terrible wordplay.
Oh my gosh, Miss Wilson. Is that her name?
Is that her name?
Yeah, Miss Wilson.
Do you want to say hi to Mom since you're on TV?
I do. She's actually going to be in town for the launch. My parents didn't plan it that way. We planned the launch kind of
independently.
Yeah, independently, really last minutely in a way.
Yeah, so you could blame Mrs. Wilson, but I think at MIT we all want to thank Mrs. Wilson because his puns are just freaking awesome.
Excellent. So that's it. We've got Dazza Greenwood and Bryan Wilson from the MIT Computational Law Report. They are doing the law review, but cool is how I'm going to say it. And you'll be able to actually read this law review without having to go to a university. So that's really interesting. That is really innovative.
We're going to steal that and put it as an endorsement on our page.
I retain animation rights.
Okay.
Deal.
Thank you all for watching, and don't disappear afterwards, guys. We'll talk about the replay availability. Thanks all. Corey, thank you for being here. Sajeesh, Yadu, Prashant, who else is here tonight? Thank you all. I hope you've enjoyed it. Catch the replay on Legal Tech Live, and we'll be back next week. Thanks again.
Thanks for having us.
Bye, guys.